email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Whitney Johnson, co-founder and CEO of Disruption Advisors, best-selling author of Smart Growth, and one of the top management speakers in the world. We pick up the discussion with me sharing with Whitney why I don't like to receive negative feedback, and Whitney explaining why negative feedback can actually be good. Yeah, so, one of my flaws is I don't like to receive feedback, negative feedback, right? And it's because I tend to fixate on it. I can get a review from a class I've done, and there could be 10, you were the best thing I've ever seen, and then one that was like not positive, and I focus on the one.
Yeah.
But you say feedback is necessary, and even if it's comes across as being negative, you still need it.
Yeah. Well, again, there is a reason why we fixate on that negative feedback. I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, our brain needs to scan for threats, right? And so when we hear something that is negative, that's a threat to our identity. There's also really interesting work that had been done by a professor at West Point at one point. I think it was called The Psychology of Combat. And basically what he said, he described it, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but that whenever someone gives us feedback or attacks us, it's like we're being emotionally killed dead. Like, it is very, very difficult for us as human beings. That being said, we do know that. So we'll flip it. So it also makes it very uncomfortable for us to give feedback, right? Because we don't want to kill people dead. And yet, a couple of stories. Number one, I was thinking the other day about a high school English teacher that I had, who I am still very grateful to her. Her name was Mrs. Erickson. Actually, it wasn't high school, it was 8th grade. And I was thinking about why I admire her so much. And I realized it was because she didn't care if I liked her or not. She didn't care if any of us liked her. She just wanted us to be good writers. And I was also thinking about the other day, I'm writing my next book, and I have this editor. Her name is Julie Berry. She has a new book. She's a young adult author published. It's called If Looks Could Kill. And when she reads my writing, she eviscerates it. I mean, there is really, truly no other word other than eviscerating. But you know what's so amazing, Clint? I don't mind. And it's not because I've got tough skin. There's something about the relationship where she's able to give feedback and I feel seen and validated. She likes me, she respects me, and so I can hear it. And so back to your point, my guess is you said you don't like feedback, but I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to tell you you're wrong because I'm addicted to being right.
He's really right, exactly.
I'm going to disagree with you because my guess is that you've gotten lots and lots and lots of feedback in your life. It's just that you don't remember the positive feedback because you felt seen by them. And so it didn't feel like a shot across the bow to your identity. So What say you to that thought?
I agree. I think it's the negative feedback that tends to stick in my head. Just like you talk to professional coaches, they'll tell you that they remember the losses way more than the victories.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it helps you learn.
It does. It's part of growth. It's part of growth. And I think you mentioned in the book, the way you put it was when you do get that feedback, even if it does feel confrontational, what they're telling you is, I care about you and I'm invested in you and I want you to be better.
That's right. And that goes back to the thing of the editor I just described. So there's something about that emotional relationship that you have with people. Now, sometimes you're going to get really negative feedback from someone who doesn't like you at all. And then you've got to figure out what you're going to do with it because there's probably some truth in it. But in general, when you think about receiving or giving feedback, what I have found is that if you approach it or are approached with this feeling of, I really see you and care about you, you can give that feedback, which is why as a manager, because we're talking about managers, if you have a person on your team that you can't do that with, you can't with love, give them that hard feedback, then that tells you that maybe they're not the right person for your team because you don't care enough for them to grow.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I'll have to keep that in mind. Luckily, I like all the people on my team, so it's good.
They're happy too.
So I was going to ask you about, your personal story of your S-curve, but you actually did it in the book. I loved how you use an example of how even the expert like yourself can maybe try to skip a step because you get excited. And you talked about helping your friend with launching a new business. I think it was a magazine, and
Oh, yeah.
how you kind of skip the whole exploration phase and it cost you.
You think? Let me tell the story.
In many ways, please.
Let me tell the story. Okay. So I had been working on Wall Street and probably feeling, not even probably, I was feeling a little invincible because I'd been pretty successful. And I also have a little bit of this isn't a negative thing. This is actually a really positive thing about myself, where when people share their dreams with me, I just get really excited. Like I am like Pavlov's dog. I'm like, what is your dream? This is amazing. Let's make it happen. And so this is one of those experiences where this woman had come to us and said, I've got this idea for this magazine. I was like, this is a good idea. Let's help you. That's all good. What wasn't good, and to your point of like skipping right over the explorer and the collector phase, is I didn't do my due diligence on her. But perhaps more importantly, I didn't bring in a lawyer to put in a contract. I allowed, even though my husband and I were putting in most of the money, I allowed her to have control of the business. I mean, such foolish things. And my husband, as we're moving along, this is like, this isn't a good idea. This isn't a good idea. And I sort of in this bullheaded way proceeded. And because I was working on Wall Street and making more money at the time, I thought, well, of course I have the prerogative to do that. And then it went completely south. She decided that she just wanted to shut down the magazine, and she could because she had control. And so fortunately, my husband and I are still married. He did forgive me, which I'm grateful for. But it was a really important lesson for both of us, of not only for him to be more willing to tell me what he's thinking, but for me to be willing to listen, to not being addicted to being right. And then back to the launch point of the S curve is you've got to do your due diligence. And so one of the things I say to people now, I was just having a conversation with someone today that we're going to do a project together. And I said, and then we're going to put together the agreement, because we just have to do that, because that's just what we need to do. It's not that I don't like you and I don't trust you and you don't like me and don't trust me. It's just that it's good process to have an agreement in writing, because it forces us to think through what we think. And then it also protects us because things could change.
They can. And I think you lost a friend in that along with some money. So it's a big lesson. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact you were that open and honest and told the story in the book. I appreciated that as well.
But you know what, Clint? I wasn't going to. That editor that I told you about that eviscerates.
Yeah.
She's like, Whitney, you are writing this book like it's so Pollyanna, like you're at the launch point of the curve, then you go to the top of the curve. And she's like, you are not telling any stories about how hard this is. I wouldn't have put that in there, but I had an editor who called me out.
Good for her or him, whoever it was.
Julie. It was Julie Berry.
Okay. Well, you're better off for it.
Earlier. Yeah. She's getting all sorts of shout outs today.
It is. So we've been talking a lot about the explorer. Let's talk for just a minute about the collector. What's that? Who's the collector?
Yeah, the collector is, okay, so you're on this S curve and you said, you know what? I'm not going to get off this island immediately. I got disrupted into here, or I chose to be here. I'm here and I'm pretty sure I want to be here. And I've answered those preliminary questions that I mentioned. But now I need to collect data and I need to decide, am I really going to commit or not? So this is a place where you're going to start doing like that product market fit or person S curve fit. And you're going to start doing some things that are going to just start to test it and test it from so for example, testing could be, I'm here and I'm going to give it my all for the next 3 to 4 months. I'm going to then see how I feel. I'm going to see if I'm gaining traction. So you're just going to collect data. It's going to be qualitative data. It's going to be quantitative data. And then so that you can make a decision. Do I really want to be here? Or do I want to just take what I've learned and move on to something else? But if the collection's actually working, what's going to happen by the end of the collection period, which is amorphous, you're going to start to build momentum and you're going to tip into the sweet spot. And, you know, I told one of the stories in the book about how I was working on this fund to invest in women. And I stayed in the collector phase way too long. Like I was collecting data and we were not raising money. Like the data was telling me that it didn't make sense, but I was being stubborn. But if you're able to have more of a process around being in these parts of the curve, then you can jump to new S curves faster and you can save 3 or 4 months, which is which is a long time if you start adding and aggregating 3 or 4 month periods where you're really should have changed curves and you haven't.
So I want to talk, there's an example of the collector you use in the book. And again, it's always nice to be humbled. No matter how successful you think you get in life and no matter how old you get, there's always somebody who did it faster and better. We have all these lists like 40 under 40 and 30 under 30, but
Yeah.
there's a young lady by the name of Michaela Ulmer who might have had her own list like 2 under 20 or something, right? Talk about her.
Yeah, so she was super interesting. So Michaela Ulmer, she is like 3 years old and she gets stung by a bee. And lots of parents, and probably I would have been that parent, would have been like, oh, you poor thing, you got stung by a bee. And then you should be afraid of bees for the rest of your life. Her parents did not do that. They're like, okay, you got stung by a bee. You've got to work through this. And so she started studying about bees, and then she started making honey and started to become an entrepreneur. And then she had her mom supporting her, and dad helping her figure out the marketing piece. But before she was a teenager, she had gone on to Shark Tank. And so she was, what part of the reason I love that story is that she had people around her who turned what could have been a traumatic experience, which was a traumatic experience, and use it as a tool of creation. And so collecting data from her parents, her neighborhood, enough data, and getting lots of advice on how to go onto Shark Tank and pitch your idea, et cetera, so that she got on to Shark Tank and was successful. It's a great story, but she's rare, right? And I think the thing that to remember is that she had the drive and she had the ambition and she had an ecosystem around her that made that possible. If she'd had different parents, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. And I stole the thunder a little bit because when you write about it in the book, you don't realize till almost the end of the story, this is a young person. You're like, oh, this is just another success story of somebody who's in their 20s or 30s. And all of a sudden it's like at the ripe old age of 15, she's on Shark Tank.
Oh, did I write it like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's not obvious at first that she's,
I love that.
100%.
I forgot that I did that.
Yeah. It's like the punchline in the end. You're like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Oh, yeah. Okay. See, you should have told this story, Clint, not me.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, you did a better job. You have all the information.
Yeah. Oh, there are lots of good stories. I do love stories for sure. Stories,
and they
great.
do a good job. They tell it to me. I'm a story person, so I remember stories more than I can just remember, just text. And so I think it did a good job. So I'm a tools guy too, and there was a couple tools that you mentioned, like the action board and the collector's notebook.
Yep.
So what role do they play?
Yeah. So the action board, this is something that I learned from Tara Swart, who's a neuroscientist and a psychologist. And the basis for this is that our brains process images much more quickly, much more powerfully. It bypasses our conscious brain and goes directly to our subconscious. And so as we're thinking about how we want to be different, and we're thinking about what S-curves you want to be on and how to get to the top of an S-curve, one of the best things you can do is not just have a vision board, but an action board. And the action board is giving you images so that your subconscious goes, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. And your brain starts to process it as if you already are that thing, as if you've already done that, because your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie. And so what happens is if you start showing it these images as if you're already this thing, your subconscious mind figures out how to make it true. And so it becomes very, very powerful if we're willing to use images to be able to represent who we want to be, even if we're not that person yet, which I think is so amazing. I remember hearing from Bob Proctor, who was kind of like a human potential before Tony Robbins type of person. He was a wonderful mentor. But the idea is that your subconscious is what's directing what you do. But your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie. So it's just acting on what you ingested between the ages of 0 and 3. So if you want to change your subconscious, you do it through repetition. But if you show your conscious mind visions, it's going to feed it to your subconscious and it'll be like, I guess I am a great skier. And then it'll start to figure out how to make you a great skier or a great tennis player or whatever. So that's where the action board comes in. And do not ever, ever underestimate the value of images to be able to help you achieve what you want to achieve.
I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was going to Georgia Tech, it's not a very easy school.
No.
And I was studying electrical engineering. And there were times when I'm like, because I was also an older student. I was in the Navy first. I was 24 or 25 when I got there. I'm like, this is just too much. I'm just going to go get a job somewhere. And there was a house on the way home from between where I was living with my brother and school. And I would pass this beautiful house. I think if I ever want to live in a place like this, I got to finish I got to graduate. And I would sit there sometimes in that front of the house, just to your point, that image was burned in my head to the point where one day I got embarrassed because the owners came home and I was in my car at the very end of the driveway by the street. I had to back out so they could get in. But that house is probably a huge reason why I graduated.
That's beautiful. That's a great example.
Yeah.
You had this image of what you wanted to be and how you wanted to be. And so it got you through. Yeah. And you could have said house with 5 bedrooms. That wouldn't have even done anything compared to that visual image, because you could, there's a wonderful saying, if you can see it, you could be it. And it's true.
And semantics matter. And you actually talk in the book, there's a difference between I run and I'm a runner. Can you elaborate a bit?
I would love to elaborate on that. So I love this stuff so much. So it's based on the work of Gregory Walton, who wrote a paper called Psychologically Precise Interventions. At the time, he was a professor at Stanford. He probably still is. And he talked about the power of our words. So remember, I was talking about your subconscious versus your conscious mind. You use your conscious mind to reprogram your subconscious mind. And so what he did is he found that when people used nouns instead of verbs, they could reprogram themselves. So if they would say, I run, that's a verb for everybody who doesn't remember their English. And I am a runner, which is a noun. And what they found, they were talking about voting and voters, that they increased the voter turnout percentage significantly, like by 13 percentage points. And the reason that happened is it shifted people's identity. So if you say, I run versus I am a runner, I start to believe, this goes back to those images that we were just describing, I am a runner. Well, what does a runner do? And it starts telling your body and your mind that you need to be doing things that runners do. And so it moves you and impels you to action in a way that the I run does not. Also, I do think it's interesting. If you look at both, Deepak Chopra talks about this. So I think it's the Hindu tradition, and also there's a phrase, Hosam, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is I am. And then also in the Christian tradition, you think about the words I am, it's another name for Jesus. And so you're evoking this tremendous creative power. So you can use it from an academic perspective, but there's also from a faith or spiritual perspective. Those words I am are incredibly powerful and creative in terms of you take those images and those words, and that starts that self-talk, and those self-technicolor pictures start to really give you that momentum and ability to visualize yourself already at the top of the curve. So of course you'll get there.
I love that. I think it does, because I am a runner means you also run. But I run doesn't mean runner. I can run because I'm being chased by a dog. I'm not a runner. I'm just running. So
that's good. I like that.
You mentioned the word autonomy earlier, and I know this is a different phase of the S-curve, but there was a story about the Scorpio SUV, and they were doing a collaboration. I think it was an Indian company doing a collaboration with Ford, and Ford basically said, no, you guys have the idea, you go do it. And it was a huge success because they were given the autonomy to do it.
Yeah, I thought that was such a great example of this. So one of the things that you talk about, or you think about when you're in the sweet spot of the curve, what's happening when you're in the sweet spot of the curve? And I actually used an acronym of CAR. You're feeling competent, you're feeling autonomous, and you're feeling related or connected to what you're doing. And so this sense of autonomy in the story of Ford is that they were in India, and it was Mahindra, and they had built up all these plans for the Scorpio, and they said to Ford, we want you to build it. And Ford basically said, no, we're not going to build it. You're going to build it. And so there was that. And at first they were like, wait, what? Why? Almost like, why do they want us to do this? But by their saying, no, this is your design. This is your car. This is yours. There was a sense of ownership and a sense of like, this is my agency. This is my country. This is my car. And they treated it differently than they would have if they were manufacturing a car from another country. And so one of the things you do feel when you're in the sweet spot of the curve, and it's one of the ways you asked me earlier, how do I know when I'm in the sweet spot? Well, because you're feeling a sense of competence. Like, I know what I'm doing and I feel good doing this. You feel a sense of autonomy, like I'm in control here. Like I feel like I have power over or power in this situation. And you also feel related in the sense of you feel connected to the work that you're doing, whatever it is. And you also feel connected to the people that you're doing that work with. And so that's one of the ways that you can know that you're in the sweet spot. But again, the power around the autonomy and that car in India was that, no, it's yours. And so act like it's yours.
And if we do it, it's going to look like a Ford. So you need it to be different. The R there was relatedness, and I'm a big team guy. And you actually mentioned Zaja Pachulia in that section, who I'm a huge fan of because he played in Atlanta for the Hawks for a while.
A long time ago, though, right?
Yeah, many years ago. But he has his own personal S curve. I was thinking about this because while he was with the Hawks, he was a big fashion guy, and since he's retired, he's started multiple restaurants, and not sports bars. I mean, real, fancy restaurants. And so he has his own rest curve as a restaurateur.
Yeah.
So you talk about metamorphs, which we talked earlier. They're like the superheroes, and they need to deliberate about what to focus on to complete their transformation. And you actually end up quoting a previous guest on the podcast, Richard Boyatzis, who says that we should focus on the positive.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the key for metamorphs why do we need to focus on that to complete our transformation?
To focus on the positive?
Yeah.
So this is something that I have been thinking a lot about recently, because basically whatever you focus on, you get more of, right? So if you focus on the bad things that are happening, your brain will start saying, ooh, bad things are important. So it will start filtering for all the bad things that are happening. If you focus on the positive things that are happening, your brain will say, oh, positive things are important. I need to start filtering for positive things. And so if you think about trying to build momentum along an S curve or in life in general, whatever you focus on or pay attention to, that's what you're going to get. And so if you can focus on what's working, so that shot worked, that the way I described that phrase worked, the way I interacted with that person worked, all of the things that happen in the course of today, your brain starts to say, that worked. Let me remember that. Let me imprint that on my brain so that I can do more of that. And so that is super powerful. And actually, I've been thinking a lot about that recently, because so much of our brain is focused on this negativity bias of scanning for everything that's going wrong. And we can actually get addicted to looking at what's going wrong. And so one of the ways that we can make tremendous progress and actually even have a competitive advantage is the ability to focus on what's working for ourselves personally, for the people around us, and even within our organizations.
There's a Tiger Woods story that comes to mind that I think states that as well. And basically Tiger works on, or he worked on the things he was really good at, because he said, I can make changes. He's working on something I'm bad at. It's incremental. I mean, it's so small, infinitesimal what I can actually do. But if I work on what I'm already good at, I can get so much better. And to me, that's like focusing on the positive and not so much the negative.
Yeah, exactly. And then just building on that from a neuroscience perspective, if you think about wherever you've got a lot of neural pathways, which is something that you're good at, then it's a lot easier to have a lot more neural pathways, right? If you've got a lot of trees in an area, a lot of flowers, then they're going to get by the bees that Michaela Ulmer was raising, not getting stung by. They're going to pollinate, and you're going to have a lot more flowers and a lot more trees. So Tiger Woods, neural pathways, focus on the positive. That is really the key to making outsized progress. Forget focusing and not even obsessing on the things that we don't do well, because we're not going to get better at them. Focus and obsess on all the things that we do well.
So what is the single most important takeaway you want readers and listeners today to grasp from Smart Growth?
I think one of the most important things I want readers to grasp from Smart Growth is this, that growth is our default setting, and we're wired to grow. It's a lot easier to grow when you have a map, and the S curve gives you that map of what growth and looks and feels like. And so if you can internalize that map, you're going to be able to move through your launch points faster, enjoy and relish your sweet spots longer, and you're going to move off your mastery points into the launch point of a new curve faster. And so I would want your listeners to really understand that this is a tremendously useful tool to help them feel more productive, more useful, and actually just have more joy in life generally because they're going to be in a perpetual state of growth.
I like that. I like the map analogy as well, because I think you mentioned a couple of people in the book who wanted to become pilots, fly. And then you talked about becoming the runner that you are now, but you add just a few seconds each time to your run, as opposed to these small bites that are achievable, as opposed to this, I'm going to double it every day from 1 mile to 2 miles to 3 miles. You made smaller incremental steps, which is also, I think, the map you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So as I wrap, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I ask up all my guests. The first one, they're really easy, quick questions. Are there any leadership principles that speak to you personally and guide your day-to-day behaviors?
Yes. This is something that I learned. I don't know if you're going to call this a principle, but it's what came to mind. So this is what I'm going with. So something that I learned from Clayton Christensen is don't separate the secular from the spiritual, which is, some people might say, be your authentic self. But basically, bring everything that you have from your academic learning to your whole being of who you are, bring all of that to your work and the work that you do.
Second question is, what's the best piece of advice you ever been given?
This is a quote, but it's still advice, that the joy we feel has very little to do with the circumstances of our lives, and back to the Boyatzis quote, and everything to do with the focus of our lives.
I love it. And finally, what is the best book or article you read recently, and what was the key takeaway?
Okay. It's fiction. I am reading these books. I'll give you 2. One is I read the Louise Penny series, which is like they're kind of cozy murder mysteries. She's an amazing author. She's a Canadian. And they're like 18 books, so it's fantastic. And then the other one is The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. And it's kind of an Jane Austen kind of book, but she's delightful and funny and clever. And who doesn't need a great rom-com in their life?
We all do, for sure. Well, Whitney, this has really been great. If people want to learn more about you, engage with you, how can they do that?
I think the best way to engage with me, obviously on LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, and you can email me at wj@whitneyjohnson.com. And if you would like a copy of Smart Growth, tell me what you've learned from this podcast with Clint. Give me your address and I will send you a book.
Wow, that's quite the offer. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So
You're
I really appreciate you
too, Clint.
Well, I think I've learned a bit.
Yeah, a little.
I really appreciate your time today, Whitney. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.